Hello, everyone. We'll just give it a couple of minutes before we begin to allow people to join. There's plenty of people joining at the moment. We'll just give it another minute or so to allow people to continue to join. Okay, and I'll just give it a couple more seconds. People are still joining. Okay, I think we'll begin. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Owen Burns. I'm chair of the Life Committee. Thank you very much for everyone for coming to the webinar today on European ESG template for insurance regulations for covering both IDD and SFDR. Just one mention I want to make before we get into the presentation proper is that there is a further event happening on the 12th of October. It's a climate risk and sustainability seminar, and that's been hosted by the Institute and Faculty of Actuaries. And it is part funded for a limited number of people who hold dual membership of the Society and the Institute and Faculty of Actuaries. So further details are on the website, but I'd encourage attendance at that as well. And if you get your name in, it'll be first in for that. So just to go through a couple of details before we do introductions, the webinar is being recorded and we hope to post it to ActuView and YouTube after the event. The Q&A section is also being recorded. And in terms of questions, you can submit questions at any time throughout the meeting. They can be posted on the Q&A portal. And Ghislain, if you advance the one slide, maybe just so we can see the Q&A. Sorry, I'll cover the competency wheel, maybe just to mention the competency wheel. The skills will be available after the result, and you can see the highlighted areas from the competency framework that are designated for this event. Then in terms of Q&A, you can, and Ghislain is happy to take questions at any time. You can submit those through the Q&A portal, which should be at the bottom of your screen. You can post them anonymously or with your name, and you can also use the raise hand functionality at any stage if you want to ask a question. And I think Ghislain will be very happy to take questions live throughout the presentation. Finally, just one other reminder that once you've registered with your full name, the Society will have a record of your attendance. It's no longer needed for verifiable CPD for the Society's record, but there may be other organizations that still require verifiability. So onto the presentation. Just as a bit of background, IDD comes into force in August and SFDR comes into force in 2023. From the beginning of August, insurers are due to question the policyholders on their sustainability preferences. And then from January 2023, insurers must provide ESG pre-contractual information on products, unit-linked general account products, etc. And later in the year, they must disclose their sustainability exposures. So around taxonomy, sustainable investments, etc. To be able to implement the regulation, insurers need to receive ESG data from their asset managers. EET is the result of the work of the full European financial industry, insurers, banks, asset managers, etc. And it's being coordinated by Ghislain under the FinDatEx umbrella. So just to introduce our speaker today, who we're delighted to have, Ghislain Perisse is the head of insurance solutions at Fidelity International. He's worked at Credit Lyonnais, Societe Generale, Merrill Lynch, Morgan Stanley, and he's worked in derivatives and quant research. He then worked at AXA Investment Managers in the insurance solutions business development, where his role was to build third-party insurance solutions business. Most recently, before his current role, he worked at Schroders as head of insurance strategy for EMEA, with the remit to grow their European insurance solutions business. In parallel with all of this, Ghislain has created the European Working Group, which created the various templates of TPT for Solvency II, EPT for PRIPS, EMT for MiFID, and then he's gone on to become the coordinator at FinDatEx to create the EET for ESG regulations, which he's going to discuss with us today. So very happy and delighted to hand you over to Ghislain, who'll bring us through the presentation today. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Angan. I'm very delighted to be invited today and to share with you all this work. As you just mentioned, the regulations, ESG regulation, sustainable finance regulation are coming into force in European Union, so in Ireland. And all of us know that for all the insurance industry is adding on top of existing regulation a new layer that is creating a lot of work and a lot of implication. So the working group that started to work 2 years ago had two objectives: to get together insurers. So Insurance Europe bring insurers from all Europe, so from 15 countries, to work out at all the ESG data that are required. And they are required, first of all, for the manufacturer, so asset manager, structured product company. You know, we have also SFDR reporting requirement at products and entity level, similarly to insurers. Allow the banks, so the distributor intermediary who are directly distributed the fund to end client, so they are regulated by MiFID II. And for all of you, for all your company you are working for as an insurer mutual, you are required to fulfill, as just said, data for IDD and SFDR. So the insurance distribution directive has a huge impact on the way of distributing life insurance product. The MOP, the multi-option product, you need to question the end client on their preferences. So for MiFID and IDD, there is a big difference. So MiFID is really at the fund level, whereas for IDD, it's at the insurance wrapper level, in which we have a general account product plus a family of unit link. So the multi-option, you need to question your end client on their preferences. There are the question as listed by the regulators. So taxonomy, do the end client want some alignment, investment in taxonomy aligned asset, sustainable investment, and does the end client want the product to consider principal adverse impact? Of course, these questions are very difficult to be understood by end client, and you might be aware that across the different broker across Ireland and continental Europe, there have been a lot of different kind of questionnaire, because the prudent person principle approach allows you to drill down a questionnaire which is different, but to come to answer to this question. So I could share that I've seen some insurer asking to the end client basic question: are you engaged, yes or no? And by engaged, they mean that any of this aspect is taken in account. And after the present product that have a minimum of any of this aspect. Some question, some insurer go some question where it's exactly the regulatory question. I'm not sure the end client will understand, but at least the regulation is fulfilled. Some other will go with 100 questions to the end client where they will deep dive. Do you want your product to take into account GHG emission, gender equality, and so on and so on. So in this EET, we try to gather all the data required by IDD and also by SFDR, but also we tried as well to integrate the way some market are questioning their end client, such that the distributor, the insurer, obviously could do it on an easier way. So the timing. So from beginning of June, the asset manager started to provide the EET on the fund level that you receive for IDD and MiFID II. And we will see which kind of data it requires. Obviously, it will depend as an insurer of the kind of question you are going to ask your end client, because I just said there could be one question, there could be 100. So there is across Europe a variety of possibility. I started seeing that is kind of very interesting. From January, there will be SFDR. So I gather from the end of August for all September, the FinDatEx working group to define which data the insurance and banking industry could get from the asset manager. On one end, we have what the regulation would like us to provide, but in terms of practicality, which data are available. You might be aware that IDD start in August. The regulation will normally force the asset manager to provide data start next year. The regulators, especially the EIOPA, so the regulator of Insurance Europe, has been clear that the data that we do provide, that we will have to provide in terms of taxonomy, sustainable investment, or any kind of data, have to come from the corporate from which we hold bond or stocks. We are not allowed to use estimated data. Or the problem is for all the corporate who are headquartered in European Union, the regulation which forces them to provide this data starts in 2 years. And for the rest of corporate where we may hold bond, equity, loans, and so on, there is no regulation. So we don't know how it's going to happen. And at this stage, we don't know, as a financial industry regulated body, asset manager, insurer, we are allowed to use estimation on this scope. But it looks like EIOPA has been clear, no estimation, really hard data from the corporate. So today, it means when you get, as an insurer, an EET from an asset manager, and I could share, for example, the one of Fidelity if you are interested during this presentation, you could see that there are some fields where we have data, and there are some fields where there exists no data. It's not that we don't want to give data, these data don't exist, because the regulator has created so many data points that it's very difficult. And we know as well the methodology to estimate taxonomy alignment, sustainable investment don't exist, because the regulators say you have to take the responsibility to define what it is. I give you some example. So it means that there will be heterogeneity of this information coming from all asset manager. And it's normal. That's the classic prudent person principle approach that make that any of the participants could have his level of interpretation. Obviously, for the end client, it might be difficult after to have something very coherent to it, or we need to be very pragmatic on this one. So the EET has been organized as all the other templates that I've coordinated, so the TPT, PT, and so on, with always the same logic. So information on the file, information on the manufacturer, the asset manager. You are interested as an insurer to know as well what is the sustainable policy of the manufacturer. So we will see how it is organized, and then a lot of information to describe the product. Some on disclosure, sustainable preferences, taxonomy, sustainable investment, principal adverse indicator, screening criteria, and so on. The pre-contractual that has to be showed under IDD, the IDD asks you to show to your end client, from 1st of January, the pre-contractual information on the option, so that on the funds that you have behind. Here, they have different layers of information to be provided according if they are following Article 8 and Article 9. I would like to point out something very important that regulators shared during last months, is that Article 8 and 9 is not a classification, it's a disclosure obligation. And when you look at the question under IDD, there is no link to Article 8 and 9. Article 8 and 9 as a bit like the SO605 and all these different kind of QRT disclosure. They are disclosure being different according to characteristic of the product. It's not a classification. So when I presented the EET to the EIOPA, they were clear that if your end client say, okay, I want to take in account GHG emission, if you have a fund following Article 6 principle and say that it's taking into account the principal adverse indicator GHG emission, this product is good for the end client. There is no restriction from the EIOPA perspective on that, you know. It's something that we like to remind because there are some market participants who think that Article 8 and 9 is a classification. It's not at all. Something that is important we'll see in the file is that the fund are in the SFDR scope, and we will see they provide information, including disclosure, that will be different if the Article 8 and 9. The rule has been for the EET that all asset managers must provide EET as well on Article 6. And also has to provide information on products that are not in SFDR scope. Why? As an insurer, all your unit link, your balance sheet is in SFDR scope. So you need as well to assess this information. So you need to have information for the product you hold on your balance sheet. I've been working with large insurers across France and Germany, for example, to help them doing an EET on their balance sheet product. Because when you propose a MOP to your end client with unit link and general account product, for example, Euro contract in France, Prima Ramo in Italy, and so on, you need to have an EET to allow to mix all this information. Something important to be aware that EIOPA is going to check, obviously, that there is this kind of level of taxonomy, sustainable investment, and all these things as well on the balance sheet of this product. Well, obviously, if it's a pure unit link multi-option product, there is no problem. But let's imagine that you have a unit link on a structured product. You need to have some information on structured product to qualify as Article 8 or 9, you know, in terms of disclosure of the unit link, and the same on the balance sheet and so on. Under SFDR, you know, there are a disclosure part. You know, in the pre-contractual document, there is a part linked to scoping, sustainable preferences, taxonomy, and different information linked to Article 8 and 9. You know, the asset manager are going to provide end of year this information, and very similarly to the way you show the pre-skid to your end client, it will be the same here with this pre-contractual information as well for the periodic we will come later on next year. The difficult part for the principal adverse indicators is that there is as well here a difference between IDD and MiFID. So a bank, if they sell directly a fund to an end client, for the principal adverse indicators, they are not forced to use the principal adverse indicators that are listed in the regulation. Whereas under IDD, you need to link the question you do to this principal adverse indicator. That's a difference. Inside, we know there are some mandatory indicators. And in the working group, we decided across from the distributors and insurers who participated that only the consideration on mandatory indicators will be used for IDD. And already the mandatory one, as you know, are slightly challenging. So let's not forget after all the optional, but already the mandatory are difficult. You know that there are three levels of principal adverse indicators. There is investee companies, so the corporate, from which you get a bond, an equity, a loan. The sovereign and supranational. Here, I can share with you that the insurers with whom I have been working on assessing sustainable investment and taxonomy element share with me that for sovereign, they will consider 0%. Because the EIOPA clearly stated that the information must be provided by the issuer. So they say, okay, let's do what the EIOPA said. As long as the states don't give us the status of their alignment with taxonomy and sustainable investment, it's not up to us to assess that. So it means that you will see the rule that this all insurer I'm discussing with are implementing really is on the balance sheet product. For all the govie sides, they consider that it does not give any exposure to taxonomy and sustainable investment because the states didn't make public their alignment. And the alignment always is not really clear, currently, for example, we have UK and Germany, importing nuclear electricity from France. In January and February, France was importing coal electricity from Germany. So it's impossible to have that. So insurers has been, okay, let's use our prudential framework. Here, we need the states to give these figures. Let's be pragmatic. Regarding the question, so in the EET, we are going to see we have the basic question. Does the fund consider the principal adverse indicators? And for all the mandatory, we have this question. We have the information obviously linked to sustainable investment and to taxonomy. Regarding the quantification, that will be the discussion I will have with my working group in September, is for which PAI does the industry consider it makes sense to provide value? Because normally in our regulatory report as an insurer or an asset manager, we are due to provide this information from next year. But it's written in the regulation for insurers that prudential Solvency II in terms of status is over ESG and SFDR regulation. So it means that if from a prudential perspective, you consider that the data you get are not good enough, you are allowed not to provide it. It's a classic, Pillar 2 governance approach and Pillar 3. So I think we will have this exercise to try to see which, for which PAI could we bring something that makes sense. There are some PAI on which we can say, oh, there is a lot of data, GHG emission, for example. But in practice, most of this GHG emission are estimated by data provider. They are not really data provided by the corporate. And if we apply what the EIOPA regulator say, we need to use only data provided by the end corporate. The problem is today that the ESMA perhaps may provide a different message on that. Whereas for the EIOPA, where the notion of quality of data, with Solvency II is stronger, might be stronger, I think. And obviously, there is always a question of coverage. Let's imagine you are one of your unit link is a 1 billion European equity fund. What is the coverage? What is the percent of this asset providing a value? 10, 50, 30%? That's an important point because the quality of data is really depending as well on what is the percent. If you do an emerging market bond or equity fund, the coverage perhaps might be lower. So is it better to provide the data that is deducted from one part or to provide and to do a kind of rule to extend that to the fund, or is it better to provide no data? That will be as well here a classic prudential approach that may be taken. In the EET, we will see we've decided to add a part around screening criteria. Per se, the regulation does not point out to specific exclusion criteria, but in all the examples provided by the ESAs on pre-contractual and periodic, they were always mentioning exclusions, so negative screening. So as a group, we decided to include all exclusions that we could find across all the ESG labels that do exist in Europe. So we have looked at the ESG labels, the FNG in Germany, the SR in France, the Belfin in Belgium, and so on and so on. We look at the exclusion and we have added them. Then there are also the sustainable investment characteristic. So in our bad continental English, we speak about thematic because it's a different meaning. But the idea was to say, okay, let's look at the in the regulation itself. The Article 2, Item 17 mentioned a list of sustainable investment characteristics. So we've listed them because several insurance and banks say, okay, we okay, it's good to speak about taxonomy, minimum sustainable investment, principal adverse indicator, but our clients don't care about that. You know, when they care, they want to have some specific characteristics. Some want to contribute to transition to low carbon energy. Some others are interested by the respect of water. Some others by gender equality. So we try to, we added this information that could be optional, but bring some information. Another part that will come with SFDR is the engagement. The regulation asks insurer to engage the corporate from which they hold stock, bond, loan. Make the share and bondholder responsible of the ESG work of the corporate, and in some sense of the sovereign and country as well, but mostly corporate to start with. So we will provide more and more information here on engagement as well. So before moving to the Excel file itself, I think we are keen on to get already some question on what was until now discussed. So you can raise your hand.
Ghislain, just one question from myself, just on you talked earlier about individual clients and having to establish their sustainability preferences. Would you be able to tell us a little bit more about how you see people going about that? What questions are being asked? And it's a pretty complicated topic, but how do we, people may not have well thought out preferences. How's the industry setting about that difficult task?
I think it's a good question, and at the end is the most difficult one. The regulation gives freedom to any insurer, to bank, to define its questions. So there could be different logic. One insurer will have a simple question, is asking to their client if they are really engaged with the ESG topic, engaged. And if the client says they are engaged, they will consider that they will have to present to this client all the products that are, I will not say dark green, but with the idea with the products that are strong on taxonomy, strong on sustainable investment, and so on. And for all the clients who say, I'm not interested by engage, they will go on doing the business as always. The analysis of the insurer was to say, okay, look, when we survey our client, we think that perhaps only 5% want to be engaged. Most of the client, well, it's between us, they say they don't care about ESG and sustainable finance. When they invest, they want to get money for what they invest. And in practice, it's only the people who have an house that are going to be less careful on the fiduciary side and more looking at the ESG. So they say, okay, we'll do this binary approach. We will propose thematic fund, demographic, climate equity or bond fund, decarbonized fund. We will select 10, 15 funds. And we see that in Fidelity. We've seen people coming to us with this thematic, and they will address these people who are already engaged. So simple question and a strong separated governance, business as usual versus very thematic, very clearly identified as contributing to decarbonization and so on and so on. Secondly, I will ask the insurance who will say, okay, the regulator asked me to ask this question. So at the end of the classic questionnaire where I need to estimate the SRI 1 to 7, I had another question, which is a copy and paste of what the regulator asked. So they take really the questions as it is, and they say, okay, no one will understand it, but we ask them, and if the people say, yes, I'm interested by any of these aspects. So I've seen some, who already put one question in which they had the 3 questions. Are you interested to have a minimum of sustainable investment, or are you interested to have a minimum of taxonomy, and are you already want the product taking into consideration principal adverse indicator? It's one question. And if the client say yes, but they will pick up through the ET any fund that there is a sustainable investment strictly positive or taxonomy strictly positive and or one PAI was this, okay, we say this product, I can show it to my client. As after there is people who start doing a bit more questions. They try to build some family of questions to try to link to the product they want also to push. So there are some who say, you know, and in the EET, we are going to see, for example, the question the French are asking to the end client, because they are in the EET. And you will see they have gather PAI, sustainable investment in 3 sets of questions, one linked to environmental. So the question are, for example, do you want your product to transition to low carbon economy? In the social, do you want your product to favor gender equality and those kind of things? And do you want your product to protect labor's rights? But when I show that to the EIOPA, oh, say that's great. Oh, this question is exactly one to see. But in practice, you know, all fund manager want the product to respect rights, so it's not linked to ESG. Everywhere we have that. UNGC, LBO, and so on, respected. Low carbon energy. As soon as you take into account the GHG emission, and most of the people, asset manager, are doing that, you consider a lot of fund. So in practice, there is a lot of freedom in this regulation. After you have the, I will say the more, I will say not more advanced, I will say more people want really to tailor-made products by family of clients, where I see them deep diving in a lot of questions. They're really asking the question on, do you want the product to take into account GHG emission? Do you want the product to take into account carbon emission? I've seen some of that in the German market, where people deep dive in some part of this question.
Okay, thanks, Ghislain. I see we have a hand up from Manus Huey. If Manus could be taken off mute. Go ahead, Manus.
Hello. Just I'm Manus from Hong Kong. So I just got a couple of questions regarding the ESG. So from the asset management perspective, like Fidelity, so how the asset manager rank their ESG score for some qualitative variables, say gender equalities. So what kind of data will base on actually? Yeah.
If you want to speak about ESG rating, here in this IDD and SFDR regulation, there is no link at all to ESG rating. I will say that the EIOPA is not really favorable to these ratings. They say it's interesting for insurers to look at that to try to classify. For asset manager, for a lot of asset manager, and I see that with Fidelity, we have an internal methodology on ESG rating. It's only because we try to identify all the E, S, or G risk will affect the value of the stock or the bond of the company. So today there is no really global consensus on that. You know, it's a very difficult topic. So that's why IDD is not using that.
Yeah. Okay, Ghislain, I think that's all the questions for the moment, and we'll come back to further Q&A session later on.
Perfect. So we move to the Excel file.
Now, I encourage people to be thinking of their questions, and if you'd like to put them into the Q&A panel as well, we'll take them at the end or during the session as they go. Thanks.
Yeah, feel free to interrupt me. Otherwise, it could be perhaps boring. Yeah. So this template, you know, is like the TPT, PT, and so on, is not compulsory. But you know, like the TPT, you know, when I created the TPT, the T was for tripartite because they were the British, the French, and the German. But everybody started using it after. So here the AT is not a regulatory template, but it has been seen by regulators and all insurers. You know, in the working group, and from Insurance Europe mentioned they are waiting to get it. So normally, it's what we are writing here in the disclaimer. Users of EET, such that distributor insurers for no fund manager, are working on the hypothesis that an EET will be provided for all fund and structured products. That's a bit the rule that is important to have in mind here. Up. I'm going to phrase the panes to make it easier. So how do we organize the EET? You have one line is one field. In the column, you can see we have the definition, the comment. In the column F, the data that as an insurer you expect to get from June. So now, currently, you need to get them. That will be the mandatory or conditional data. In the column G, here will be the data that we estimate that could be provided for SFDR. And you can see here in these different columns, we try to explain to which regulation is pertinent each data. So you have the periodic reporting, the pre-contractual, the entity level, so insurer and distributor, which one are pertinent for MiFID, for IDD products, for MiFID in the client journey, and for IDD in the client journey. So you can see we try to get all regulation in the same template because we wanted to ensure the consistency across the market. So you can find information around here, the version of the EET. We suppose that the regulator will change regularly the regulation. That's why there is a versioning, like in any template. Information on the producer. Here you have a part that helps you to know if this information has fulfilled. So currently, information must be fulfilled for MiFID and IDD, so there will be a yes here for the product. Then we have information on the manufacturer, for example, Fidelity. So you will find the information, the LEI, that's a codification code to designers. The reference date, so for example, here it will be end of August. Then you start receiving here information on the commitment of the manufacturer. Insurers and distributors say they would like to know if the asset manager is a signatory of the PRI. So you may know the PRI, Principles for Responsible Investment. That's an initiative of the United Nations to define a minimum set of principles for the asset manager to manage in a sustainable way. The PRB for the structured product, so responsible banking. So we have after the notation of the PRI. When the asset manager is not directly a PRI signatory, but the subsidiary of PRI entity could be mentioned in the following field, PRB, PRI compliant. When it's managed a sustainable investment, like if it would have been a signatory, but it's not yet, we've give as well this possibility because we know that there are small asset managers that are not equipped to go to the PRI to do it, but they follow the principle. All these fields are here optional. But for example, in the case of Fidelity, we decide to say, yeah, we sign it, we are A+, we are compliant, of course, and we are following commitments. So commitments, I can show you. It might be small on the screen. You have TCFD, the Carbon Task Force. NZAMI, that's the Net Zero Initiative. You may work a lot with the UK market, and in the UK market, there have been a lot of people who say I want to be net zero by 2050. So that's this kind of initiative to which Fidelity participate. You have stewardship code, the way you vote, your way you engage company. UNGC, that's about human rights. And normally we find a lot of people signatory of A, B, D, E. So here, asset manager has the possibility to do that, and yourself as an insurer, I think it's important for you to gather this information because first of all, from a prudential approach, when selecting your fund manager, you could say, look, they are PRI. In terms of commitments, they are following this commitment. It allows you to have a kind of grid to analyze. and assess some element on the manufacturer. A large manufacturer with it of that, could be generating a bit more greenwashing, where someone who has signed a lot of commitment and PRI, and they are due to implement as they are checked as well in their implementation. We have the same here. On the stewardship code. So we try to build a list of stewardship code here across Europe. They are not only Europe. So we find Europe, Germany, Netherlands, Singapore, Switzerland, Taiwan, UK, US, Japan, Hong Kong, Norway, Italy, Sweden, France. So that's all the governance of stewardship code in these different countries. The specific high level of governance rules in terms of voting, engaging the company. So it gives another sense of the engagement of your asset manager and yourself tomorrow when you will have to report to the regulator in Dublin. You could take a look. I'm engaging through the asset manager I'm using in my balance sheet or unit link. So it's an information of importance because you will have to justify of the engagement. So this information here, you need to start gathering, challenging as well your asset manager to get it for you. In the regulation, there is an obligation to give a link to the stewardship and engagement website page of the asset manager. So you will have it here. Then here, after we move to the product part. Alors, it starts being a bit more complex. So we describe the instrument. So we give the ISIN, we give the currency. And thereafter, we start with first information. What is the typology under SFDR? Is it in the scope? 0, the product is not in the scope. Then it could be after following Article 6, 8, or 9. But I remind, it's not a classification, it's a disclosure obligation. Then, if the product is not in the scope for your unit link or your balance sheet, you need to have more information because you need to understand if this product, once in the balance sheet or once in unit link, enters the SFDR scope because the unit link are in the SFDR scope. So here you need to get information if this product follow Article 6 guideline. If the product is managed like an Article 8, if this product managed like an Article 9, So an option on an Article 8 like become an Article 8. So you need to have this information. There was a strong demand to get the ESG label. So we try together. I say we try because I don't know if it's a stable list to get labels that exist in Europe. So you have, for example, the FNG Siegel in Germany, all the Lux flag in Luxembourg, FinSol ESR in France, Fabelfin in Belgium. So there are some markets where this label has been, for example, like ESR in FinSol has been put in place by the French government a few years ago to avoid greenwashing. Here there is a real control of the product to follow the label. Some things that will be required for SFDR later on in the year is to know when your unit link is in a fund of fund, is this fund of fund as a minimum of Article 8 or a minimum of Article 9. You might be familiar that a MOP with 5% of Article 8, for example, is Article 8. For an article or 5% of Article 9 will be an Article 8 like. If a MOP to be Article 9 must be 100% Article 9. So this information are required to this kind of, I will say, typology of disclosure at the insurance wrapper level. Main ESG focus. If the idea of this field is if the product will have to be designed by one focus, which will it be, E or S or G? that something of importance in certain markets like Germany and Austria, where they have built a specific questionnaire across the banking industry to go with only one questionnaire to the client. So they sit together, created this questionnaire together. And one of the aspects of the question is, do you want to have more an angle on environment, social, governance? E, people know, like climate, product. S, it's a lot, for example, it could be healthcare, other product. Governance come, for example, for emerging market, because obviously, normally in the E and S, there is a lot of investment across OCDE countries, whereas on the G, the idea is it could be a specific approach on emerging market where, by definition, the market are the level of governance is lower than in OCDE countries. Then we have this famous question: does this product consider principal adverse impact indicators? And further, later in the file, we will see all this list. Something that is especially designed for insurers is this part about the fact that all the pre-contractual and periodic must be translated in the language of distribution of the country, which is not an obligation for banks. For bank insurer, yes, but not for bank distributing only fund. So that's something where we try to list. So if you distribute in France, in Germany, or Italy, everything must be translated. So you need to ask your asset manager to translate the pre-contractual and the periodic. Then we are following the way pre-contractual and periodic documents have been structured. So here for Article 8, asset manager need to say if the pre-contractual documentation includes already sustainable investment. So in this case, you will see here, yes. If it does not include yet, but it's an engagement, it will be I, and so on. It's a bit difficult, but why? IDD start now, and the regulation for asset manager next year. So the obligation of having the sustainable investment minimum or taxonomy in the prospectus is due for asset manager normally only from 1st of January. But for you, insurer, you need to have this information now. So that's why we try to split the yes between a yes, it's in the contractual already, or yeah, it will be, but it's not yet. We're facing the kind of reverse timing of the regulation. After you find information on the minimum proportion of sustainable investment, as mentioned, the definition by the regulator has been very broad. So for the same European fund, you will find different minimum. And also, each asset manager will have a different understanding or ESG integration process or compliance approach, making this number different. Something to be aware today, defining a range of sustainable investment minimum or taxonomy investment for the end client does not make really sense, because there will be a kind of heterogeneity, volatility of these numbers. The same here for taxonomy. So that's why we tried a bit to bring a bit more information than what the regulation requests. Here we have given the name of ESG thematic investing description for this part. The idea is to bring a bit more information on what kind of sustainable investment it is. In the regulations, Article 2, Item 17, try to list example of environmental sustainable investment. And the exact list is this one: renewable energy, raw material, and so on. Bon. The same with social, inequality, social cohesion, social integration. So that's in the regulation. But for me, I don't know what is the difference really between social cohesion and social integration. And all for a specific corporate, I could decide is more one than the others. Investment in human capital. I know it includes healthcare, but what else it does include? So that's the definition of sustainable investment or example provided by the regulator. As of today, it's optional field, but we say to asset manager, okay, please provide this information because some insurance distributor want really to know which characteristic, which component a specific fund is considering. We have introduced some things that is not at all in the regulation, but is commonly used, like the SDG, the Sustainable Development Goals. There is a list of 17 that has been defined by the United Nations kind of a while, with hundreds of sub-items that are covering a lot of aspects. You can see no poverty, zero hunger, good health, quality education, gender equality. And the asset management industry has been using that already for years to try to be able for a specific product to say, okay, look, I can say that this product contributes to the specific sustainable development goals. So this framework is not used by the European regulators, but many insurers and distributors have been using that because, for the one who are cross-border or global, SDG is a bit like TCVSD, is some worldwide metrics that people are using. But bon, European regulators don't consider them. Here there is a part on engagement. So stewardship engagement. So engagement, you know what it is? It is when you are investing in a unit link or a balance sheet, you hold the stock or a specific company. You look as an asset manager or what this company is doing in terms of environmental impact, social, and if they are not going well, you engage discussion, lawyer, later, publicly, to make some changes and to move ahead and change a strategy to be more renewable driven and so on and so on. So we will try to, in the future, to give this kind of information. There's that at an insurer, when you look at your global balance sheet, and let's not forget unit-linked on the balance sheet yet, when we put all the general account and all unit-linked, we say, okay, across that, we are following in terms of ESG scoring, 80%. In terms of engagement, we are engaging 3%. We need to have this kind of matrix for your SFDR report for for the SRD regulation, shareholders, regulatory disclosure that happen soon as well. I'm sure you will love sustainable regulation. I think it might be even more difficult than Solvency II. Here, after there will be the benchmark next year. Then here there is a part that will come later on in the year, the pre-contractual, that asset managers are going to provide, or they will provide more information. Today, in the pre-contractual part, we ask asset manager to provide the minimum of sustainable investment and the minimum of taxonomy alignment. That's the kind of information that are interesting to get for the questions. When I look at what the market is providing, taxonomy, vast majority will be zero. Why? European Commission itself said a few months or years ago that only 1 to 5% of the activity of the corporate headquartered in Europe are aligned with the taxonomy. So if they say it's only 1 to 5, I mean, how an asset manager could estimate this information, because the definition of the 6 sub-items as well are a bit difficult to follow, is a corporate and don't provide this information. And the EIOPA said clearly the information must be provided by the corporate. So it's very difficult for asset manager to set a minimum on something where we don't have data from the corporate, especially when the range provided by the regulator say it's around 1%. So there will be only very strongly ESG fund focusing on renewable energy and so on that could say I have 1%, 2%. Sustainable investment is a bit different. It's a bit broader, we have seen. So we may see 10%, 20, 40, 50, because it's broader. The definition has to be defined by each asset manager, but it's defined by each asset manager. So when you deal with 10, 200 asset manager, you can wait for volatility fluctuation of these numbers. Something to be careful. I would say don't base question to your end client on specific range of taxonomy sustainable investment. First, the value are small, and secondly, they are very heterogeneous. Here after we will have information on periodic. For the time being is optional, so I'm certain that by year end we may have a second session on what will be required by SFDR, so I will not dig into that. Here we have a specific field for IDD target market. So if you discuss with your distribution colleagues within your company, you know that they need to be a target market where you estimate the risk level of your client, which you can assess which product you can buy, and so on and so on. With the with the ESG, there is no negative target market. It means that you are obliged to question your end client on the famous questions, but you are not going to provide the client with this product if it's not suitable from a risk perspective. You know, I give always the example of my grandmother who likes equity, but now when she go to an IFA in France, she cannot get 100% of equity because it's not, she's 95 years old. It's not something for her. So she could ask all of that. In practice, we get 20, 30%. There is the SRI respect. So here, that's the same story. But there is a principle of governance that is, you need to ask your end client on the sustainability preferences. And as an asset manager, the only thing that you can do is to say that if potentially somewhere this product is suitable to an end client who will have some sustainability preferences, is the only way. And here, that's why the answer could be yes. Neutral, it means that this product cannot be suitable at all. Let's imagine, for example, a portfolio of oil company stocks, okay, or a commodity fund. This one in no sense is suitable. So here it will return neutral because there is no negative target market. But here this field is only for governance purpose. Here we will have a difficult part by year end will be the taxonomy alignment, where I can show you, you will see how it's very difficult. The regulator asks the asset manager to define the alignment with the taxonomy with or without sovereign bonds. Well, if the state don't give us their taxonomy alignment, it will be the same figure here. They need to say what is the minimum share of transitional activity and enabling activities. It's not defined, really. So what do I consider as transitional? You know, do we consider oil company as transitional or not at all? They will disappear, so it's something else. So it's really difficult to do that. And after, we need to split that. Revenue, CapEx, OpEx, you will see a lot of information. I will not say it's awful, but it's very, very, very challenging. You know, here, for example, we find the different sub-items, you know, of the taxonomy. I'm going to make it a bit larger so you can see that because it's very interesting. So initially, the regulator wanted to have a percent, but it's, when we look at a company, is this company helping the climate change mitigation, the climate change adaptation, protect water and marine resources, help to transition to circular economy, help pollution prevention, help protection and restoration of biodiversity and ecosystem? Wow. You know, we really need corporate to provide this information. It's very difficult. Before moving to the principal adverse indicator, I would like to know, is there any question on this first part? Herhan, do you see any question popping up?
No, I don't see any questions at the moment, Ghislain, but I'm sure we will get some more coming in as we go along. So please, if people have any questions, if you enter them into the panel or raise your hand. We'd be very happy to take them.
So let's go on. Thank you. So principal adverse indicators, impact. Alors, this part is pretty long. It's not the fault of the working group, it's the regulator. You know, they created something 64 indicators, but some of them have 2 questions in the same indicator. So we needed to split in 80 plus indicator. For each of them, the important question that insurers and distributor and working group say is it considered in the investment strategy? For example, here GMG emission scope 1. For perhaps participants who are not used to what is scope 1, is you take a company, you look at the direct emission of this company. So the office where you work and so on and so on. So here is mean when you select your company, do you take this kind of information? And you can see where I did information that one day we will be able to answer to the value for a specific fund of this J emission scope 1. The coverage, it means among the corporate will have to provide which percent are delivering this information, 10, 20, 30, 50. And eligible asset. So if I take, for example, an equity portfolio, 100% is eligible for this indicator because they're all corporate, or 95% if they are 5% cash in the fund. Then the coverage will be the proportion of them delivering this information, and then we will have a value that the logic will be to be rebased to the fund. But as of today, you can see the industry say, okay, let's provide only the information if it's considered. Value, and the same for SFDR for the time being when we discuss that in February, you know, insurers were participating to working groups say, okay, prudentially wise, in SFDR, we might not be able to provide this information because prudential wise, we estimate they are wrong at this time being. You know, you take 4 methodology and the number are going from 1 to 10. So that's a difficult point. So here you will have the list of all this principal adverse indicator. For example, the scope 2. So scope 2, you take one corporate and the pollution of the supplier. In the scope 3, you add the emission of the product that you have done. For example, a car manufacturer is not that good on the full scope 1, scope 2, scope 3. But you know, the largest polluter in the US in scope 3 is Netflix, second YouTube, because video streaming is far more polluting than any other thing. So if you take the scope 3, you know, data center in the US is more than 20% of the electricity consumption. So when you take this different scope, you can start getting a sense. You know, you look at the study of the IOPA who say that you know, a teenager with a smartphone that used 6 hours a day is polluting as much as me, 50 years old, with my diesel car. Because in practice, when you look at the life cycle plus the consumption, you know, a smartphone can consume for electricity 4 times the electricity of a bridge by month. Plus, you have all the data center behind. You know, 2/3 of the bill is the electricity that you pay behind for the computer and everything. So you have a lot of factors. You have the GHG emission, the carbon footprint, a lot linked to energy. I will go through. As you are insured, you are familiar with the NACE code, you know, that you find when you do your QRT. That's a classification by sector. And here, that's something where asset managers are not used to. You know, we are used to use MSCI, S&P sectors, and so on. And there is no ready data, you know, pairing between NACE and this. You can imagine. You have biodiversity. Alors, look, in the portfolio, do you take in account the negative affecting biodiversity sensitive area? You know, mean, it's very difficult. Internally, you know, within Fidelity, we do that for our biodiversity equity fund. That's it. For all the other, it's so difficult to get this information from a company, or it's very difficult to assess. So to take it in consideration will take a while. Some other metrics are easier. Water, because here there is always some communication. The waste of company, it's easier. On the social side, violation of UNGC, so United Nations Global Compact Principle, is something that pretty everybody is following. So this one is an easy one. Unadjusted gender pay gap. It's difficult to get this information. There are only a few countries who provide the pay gap between male and female. So for this one as well is very difficult to use because most of the countries don't provide this information. Biodiversity, board gender diversity. Here it's easier because all corporate give always a split between male, female, and so on. So here this information possible to track. Controversial weapons as well. So after you have some principal adverse indicators are sovereign level. So you have if the country follow or not, are subject to social violation. So here this kind of metrics are easy to follow. The same for real estate. So here that's for the mandatory part. I will not go through the indicative part, but you can imagine it will be difficult for asset manager to get this information. Inorganic pollutants, air pollutants. I mean, the corporates themselves, they don't know. The impact on ozone depletion. I will show you some others that are very interesting. So the company will be required to have a biodiversity protection policy. Or we need to identify as an asset manager which of them don't have it. Let's imagine tomorrow the asset manager, we are going to be the policeman asking the corporate, are you doing that? The regulator is transforming the financial industry is a bit or like the guardian of all the corporate world. So let's move on to another part, social aspect. After in the file, we try as well to introduce, as mentioned earlier on, the screening. So the exclusion, negative screening. Here there is a demand from any insurer and distributor to be sure they don't have specific exposure. So here we decided to do a full list of what we found in the ESG labels. So we have adult entertainment, alcohol, animal testing, cannabis, conventional weapons, coal. I don't know, for example, in France, coal is excluded everywhere. Gas, I think we are being excluded currently. Nuclear energy, for example, it's a kind of systematic exclusion in Germany. Nuclear weapons, oil, palm oil, pesticides. Pesticides are forbidden, for example, in Austria. Tobacco. In which country tobacco is not excluded? That's a good question, this one. Which country in Europe is using a lot of tobacco and does not exclude that for cultural reasons? It's a question, huh? We need to survey. It's Sweden. I don't know the word. I always forget the word in English. They take the tobacco in the mouth, and everybody is doing that. So for each of them, there is a story behind. You can imagine the working group from 15 countries, different culture to try to mix all of that. Then we decided to have some specific country information. For example, in France, the regulator is gold plating IDD and MiFID. There is a SFDR. They have created 3 categories. Instead of Article 8 and 9, they have need a bit more stress on 1, 2, 3, so kind of 8, 8 plus, and 9. In the French MiFID market, it has been brought in by the banks, so bank insurers. That's the question they are going to ask their client. There are 3 questions. Environment, they are going to ask their client, do you want your product to help transitioning to low carbon? Preserve natural resources, preserve the ocean, take care of waste, preserve biodiversity. Do you want your product to take care of human rights, labor relations, investment in human capital, healthcare? Do you want the product to take care of anti-bribery and corruption? That's the questions they are going to ask. And in these questions, they do include PAI, taxonomy, and sustainable investment. In Germany, they have created as well their approach, but it's a bit more difficult. They have built a kind of grill with different steps. But here you can see the kind of threshold, but that's the German banks, and that's not the German insurer. So you can see the German threshold that are used. So for example, tobacco is 5%. It means that they are going to exclude companies that are producing more than 5% of the turnover in terms of tobacco. Coal is 30%, and so on and so on. But bon, the German system is a bit more complex. And I think that I went through the 580 fields. I think there is a lot, but as you can see, it's trying to answer all this regulation. And let's imagine that tomorrow as well, we need to do same thing on liability and to try to build something across.
Ghislain, thank you very much for an excellent presentation. I think you highlighted hugely sustainability is such an important topic at the moment across each of the E, the S, and the G, and we've even seen some of the most recent events just around temperature levels, that the E is hugely important for the world, but all of them are important. And I think really just covered in a very comprehensive manner some of the practical details, but also highlighting the complexity that's inherent in this, and helping, thanks also for helping to produce this standardized table, helping the financial services navigate the challenges from EU taxonomy, IDD, SFDR, all these regulations, and I suppose with the end aim of producing something simple and understandable for customers that meets their needs. So it's a huge objective and target. We've started getting some questions coming in, and just maybe one question, if I could ask for myself, just in terms of since the 1st of June, when the EET, when this template has been out there, have you found that manufacturers and investment managers, asset managers have been showing good cooperation with this of recent times? Have they been producing it? And I suppose, are there issues with coverage, or are many even going further and producing some of the optional fields? Imagine getting the mandatory fields first is still a high bar, and you've touched on some of the difficulties in judging it.
From the feedback I get from insurers I work with, they do receive EET on the vast majority of the funds they are using. On the optional side, perhaps it was not the first target of manufacturer. The difficulty has been obviously for the asset manager to decide what is the minimum of taxonomy, sustainable investment. That has been certainly the difficult point. For the asset manager, we have a strong ESG integration. It's easy. In Fidelity, I think we were one of the first to produce the EET and to check with the market, and it was not complex to do it because internally all this information, when it exists, is available. To put it in the EET is not complex. The more difficulty is to say, okay, what are the thresholds we consider for sustainable investment or taxonomy or not? And from our analysts, we discussed directly with the corporate was to get from them this information, and that's perhaps the difficult part. So Today, I think what is challenging is certainly for the smaller asset manager, for the asset manager who are not based in Europe and not familiar with the regulation. I remember some session of the working group where a large US asset manager said, I'm not going to provide it. And when Allianz say, no problem, if you don't provide it, I keep you out. My regulation, I have no choice. I need to have this information. And from a prudential perspective, I need to receive the ET to prove to the regulator I've done my job. So, yeah. And I just read one of the questions we received again about the refresh on the EET.
Yeah, there's a question from Cal O'Doolin. Just once it's established, how often would it be expected that the asset manager refreshes the EET? I guess how often, first part of it, how often might the underlying data change?
Yeah, for this first year, obviously we need to we did step by step. So we do, for example, in Fidelity, we did 1st June. We just are doing now another one where we have done some improvement from what we have done beginning of June. After, there will be one in November or December to be provided by the full industry to include the pre-contractual information that insurers need to have. So the another ET will be provided in the first quarter with the periodic information on 2021. My view will be that the minimum will be annual, but my practice of the insurance industry will be that asset manager, we need to do that on a quarterly basis because, in the QRT, there is an obligation under SFDR to provide this information each quarter, the classic 5 weeks before end of quarter. So it means that each beginning of quarter, April, July, and so on, October and January, asset manager will have to be quick to provide this information, thus that at the same time as the TPT, thus that you could provide and take a look where we are, because this will be used by the regulator to track the impact of the politics.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I suppose the second part of the question from Cal is historic data a problem? Like, how do we ensure that the underlying corporate data that was used isn't overly stale? Are you finding that, or it may be too early to say, but do you expect that data will change much as it's produced, at least annually, as you say, or between the June and the November versions?
Perhaps for a corporate itself, the data will be, they provide this once a year, but we can imagine that in the portfolio there will be some turnover, making that the exposure will change. And I will say that today, when I look, for example, at Fidelity, what is being done, obviously we look at what the data provider says they get from corporate, but also our analysts, analysts discuss directly with the corporate, and we can check if they provide this information or not, and we record this information. That's the interest of analyst house like ours, where we can track sector by sector this information to try to look if there is no overstatement, because greenwashing might be a topic, but also it could come, as you just say by our colleague, it could be a corporate overstating and saying, okay, look, I'm so much green, but you look, perhaps they will say a figure, in practice it's far lower. Yeah. So quality of data is a challenge, and it may remain for a while, to be frank. But I think historical data is interesting for the report side. But if we want to assess a bit the future, here's the interest to go to asset manager who are able to deep dive and to have some forward-looking view on the way corporate are going to change their strategy. Because the figure of today is important. Let's imagine you discuss with BP or Total and say, okay, look, today they do only perhaps 5% renewable energy, and say, oh, in 2050 we have 30%. But you need to have an analyst to really deep dive and to be sure that what they put strategy in place goes this direction. And that's also another risk in all of that.
And absolutely. And then just on greenwashing, while you bring it up, Ghislain, do you see, obviously regulators and I guess the financial industry itself is very concerned about perceptions of greenwashing. have you seen many, just so this is a more general question outside of the template, but have you seen many asset managers downgrade their funds that maybe they thought they were Article 9 or hoped they were, but as transparency around it and expectations have become clearer, or maybe they were from Article 9 to Article 8, or maybe Article 8 to Article 6 on the journey?
Exactly, there has been two markets where there have been some trouble. In Italy, the Consob, the local regulator, along with IVAS, has been shouting after insurance distributor and asking them to get rid of certain funds that were classified as Article 9 and 8 when they were follower. And they say, first of all, it's not a classification, what I said. And secondly, they say, you are greenwashing on that. That's a point. A second is in the German market, where an asset manager gets a lot of problem with greenwashing. Today, I've seen one of the largest broker in the German market, around 35% market share. They have taken a third-party institute to check that the Munich link, so on each fund, Article 8 and 9. They say, we don't rely on the self-assessment of asset manager, and if you want the fund to be distributed across Allianz or Barmi or any kind of life insurer, you need to get this option, so this fund validated by this institute. Because they say they don't want to distribute something where the asset manager has self-assessed something.
So yes, no, that makes sense. And then just final question, I think, because we unless there's any further questions come in, just final question, just around minimum coverage, and you made some comments about that. Do you have any guidance for people in terms of the minimum coverage that, you know, advisors and funds or you know what I mean, bringing together might need in order to give disclosure to consumers to keep it valid for their sustainability preferences?
Yeah, you know, my view will be to use what the European Commission say. So when they say that only 1 to 5% of the activities of corporate are taxonomy, I will say that 1% of minimum taxonomy could be considered as already a hard green product, to be frank. In terms of sustainable investment, I will not have a proper view because the regulator, European Commission, did not mention anything. So, you know, in Germany, they consider coal, you know, as green energy, or gas. So it's pretty difficult to have a view. Yeah, I'm exaggerating, but my view would be that in terms of sustainable investment or taxonomy today, I will consider only if this figure are positive. Because if this figure is positive, it means that the asset manager has done the work to assess it, to look at it. After, if it's 10 or 40%, to be frank, it's depending only on an internal methodology. You know, so I will be very careful with any range today and to start really on a very conservative way, because there will be a risk for the IFAs as well as for insurers to say, okay, look, there are the 0 to 10, 10 to 20, 20 to 30, because if tomorrow the regulator come and check the methodology and someone was 30 dropped to 5, like it's happening now with Article 9 for dropping to 8, the risk will be on the broker, on the IFA, on the insurer.
Yeah, and certainly there's a huge risk, I guess, on the reputation of the overall industry for people who are looking at investments. Starting humble, that, you know, the example I give you initially was this insurer asking, are you engaged or not? So the engaged propose thematic fund to the other classic business. I will not say that's the best solution, but when I look at all model, it looks at from my angle, minimizing the reputational risk. Okay. Well, Ghislain, I think we're finished our questions now. All that remains to bring the meeting to a close, but just to thank you once again. This is, you know, sustainability, ESG. It's a really important topic for all of humanity, and I think just covered all of gave it an insight into the practical nature of it, all of the different elements that the financial services industry must grapple with in terms of investments over the time, and how in particular here, how the template can act as, you know, really helps get around and overcome some of the challenges of bringing a huge amount of very complex data together with the aim of advising customers and helping people match their preferences. So just to thank you one last time and say, on behalf of all the society and everyone here, thank you very much. And indeed, I'd like to thank all of the attendees today for turning on and hearing more about this subject. So and just to remind you that the recording or re-recording, if there's other people that you want to let us know, it'll be posted to AccuView and YouTube after the event. So thank you all very much. Have a good afternoon.
Thank you. Bye-bye.